Good to start? Okay. I would like to call to order this meeting of the Forest Grove City Council. It is January 27th and it is 7:07. Will the city recorder please call roll?
Councillor Gustafson? Here.
My mic on.
Council President Valenzuela?
Here.
Councillor Schimmel?
Here.
Councillor Falconer?
Here.
Councillor Martinez?
Here.
Councillor Marshall?
Here.
Mayor Wenzel?
Here. Forest Grove City Council meetings are located on the land of the Tualatin Kalapuas, who call themselves the Atfalati. They are now part of the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde. Will the council and audience please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item B on our agenda is public comment. Time provided for anyone wishing to speak to the City Council on an item not on the agenda or on the agenda but not scheduled for a public hearing. Comments are limited to 2 minutes unless additional time is granted by the presiding officer. The public comment period shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority of councilors present vote to extend the time. Zoom attendees may use the raise hand option to be called on. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to provide public comment? Seeing none, is there anyone on Zoom who would like to provide public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to item C, the consent agenda. Items under the consent agenda are considered routine and will all be adopted with a single motion without separate discussion. Councilors who wish to remove an item from the consent agenda may do so prior to the motion. Any item to removed will be discussed and acted upon following the approval of the remaining items. What is the wish of council?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, Council President Valenzuela moved to approve the consent agenda and Councilor Gustafson seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All of those opposed, same signal. Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved by the Forest Grove City Council in a vote of 7-0. Additions and deletions. City Manager, are there any additions or deletions?
No additions or deletions. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Any proposed by council? Seeing none, we will move on to presentations. We have 2 presentations this evening. We're going to begin with a presentation from our Metro partners about the TV Highway Bus Rapid Transit Project. So I would like to invite Jess. Well, I think they're online. Jess is online. Or is everyone else online too? Is it just, oh yes, some people are here. Okay, cool. Sorry. Thank you. Are you guys David and also
Kelly Betteridge, the Investment Areas
Okay,
Manager.
sorry, Kelly, you were on my agenda. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
So I believe Jess is going to be running the slides remotely. Is that true? I'm looking at Jess right now on the screen.
No, I think Mariah is going to be running them from the room.
Okay. As long as somebody does, because I'm not plugged into anything.
Yeah, we got you covered.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us this evening. My name is Jess Deb. I'm a principal regional planner at Metro and the project manager for this project. And as you may be able to tell, I have a little bit of a cold. And so I am sorry to not be there with you in person tonight, but still wanted to represent the project. And I'm glad to be joined by Dave and Kelly, and I'll let them introduce themselves and then head into our presentation.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Betteridge. I'm the Investment Areas Manager at Metro.
David Alwas, Capital Planning Manager at TriMet and Project Manager for TriMet on this project. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. All right. Mariah, you can go ahead to the next slide. So this is a project that has been before City Council, I believe twice, once with my predecessor, Aaron Key, who was the original project manager, and then our Metro co-chairs, our councilors, Gonzalez and Rosenthal came to present this project probably over a year ago. So many of you were at that presentation, some of you weren't. And I also know that we've had Mayor Wenzel serve on our steering committee, and we've just had our first meeting with Councilor Schimmel as the new representative for Forest Grove on the steering committee. So tonight what we're here to talk about is this transit and safety study that we've been conducting on TV Highway. And in particular, this meeting is a lead-in to our steering committee meeting, which is on February 13th, where we'll be asking our steering committee to approve a locally preferred alternative. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So this project has been going on since April of 2022 was when our steering committee first met. We are trying to find a transit project that will improve the safety and travel experience for transit riders along TV Highway. We're building on a lot of years of planning and community identified needs, especially for safety and better transit. And our goal with this project is really to find something that can move forward with a project that gets funded by the Federal Transit Administration. Next slide, please. So why are we talking about the Line 57? TV Highway has more serious and fatal crashes than other roads in the region, and we know that safety continues to be a real priority for everyone in the community. In particular, there are a lot of pedestrian crashes on TV Highway, and many of those are located near transit stops. We know that folks run across the road right now to access transit stops without accommodation to cross, and feel and are not safe in doing so. The Line 57 on TV Highway also has the most daily boardings in Washington County. It's over 6,000 riders a day. And this line has had the highest bounce back in ridership since COVID-19. We know it's really a lifeline service, especially on the western end of the corridor in Forest Grove and Cornelius, where the only other transit service is provided by Ride Connection. Also, folks in the corridor who are riding the 57 are like this gentleman here in some places where there's no shelter, no seating, no lighting, and they are waiting on the side of the roadway, sometimes even without a curb between them and traffic. Additionally, the bus takes sometimes up to twice as long as driving, and we know that that provides a real hardship for people who are taking transit. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, our steering committee has been on a journey over the last 2.5 years. We're building on past planning efforts along TV Highway from Washington County, from ODOT, from Metro, and also from the city of Forest Grove with the Safety Action Plan, where a lot of the planned investments for that overlap really well with those of the transit project. Our steering committee adopted a purpose and need early in this project, which is the statement that we'll use in moving forward with federal funding as to why we're doing this project. We did a lot of work to figure out who lives in this corridor. We know that there is a higher percentage of both people of color and people who are low income than in the region and then the rest of Washington County. We did a lot of work to refine our project design after coming up with an initial design that was far outside what project partners really felt like was going to be feasible to fund. So we spent a lot of time figuring out whether there were different options to split the corridor, to phase this project, and we got strong direction from our steering committee that they really wanted to see a project from end to end, all the way from Beaverton Transit Center to the terminus at 19th and B in Forest Grove. This past July, steering committee again gave us direction to pursue a federally funded project after investigating some other options. And we also heard really strongly in our phases of public outreach that there's support for bringing these types of investment to TV Highway, especially in terms of safety and also in terms of just really increasing the dignity of transit riders in this corridor. So I'll hand it off to Dave to talk about the types of benefits that this project would bring to the TV Highway corridor.
Thank you, Jess. So we're pretty excited about the project and what it could potentially bring to this corridor. So I'm going to share some of that with you. So next slide. Thank you. So enhanced crossings at traffic signals at all stations. What that means is there's going to be some sort of a median island or a rapid flashing beacon or a signal of some sort. So pedestrians have a way to get across that intersection safely. That isn't always the case today, and there's quite a few places out there where pedestrians do need to make a run for it, and we really want to make that change. Looking at safety and accessibility, we would be making sure that there's a route that connects these stops to a sidewalk that is meeting current accessibility standards. Every single station is going to have a platform with a curb and a waiting area. That's a commitment that the project is making. As you saw in that picture up there, you know, a lot of the stops in that segment adjacent to the Union Pacific Railroad right away is pretty bad. There's no curbs. There's no anything that's protecting pedestrians or our patrons waiting there. We will also be getting rid of these eliminating the partial pull-out stop design. What that is it's when the bus pulls off into a bike lane, but it's not quite out of the travel lane either. And that's sort of this ambiguous situation where we have cars that try and squeak by or sneak by the bus and end up in a sideswipe condition or get into a tangle with another car, or maybe there's a rear end accident. This project is committing to either having the bus stop in lane or out of lane completely, but none of this kind of middle ground anymore. And let's see here, a couple more points. Okay, I also want to mention that we worked with ODOT and did quite a bit of work to make sure that we actually understood where those pullouts really need to be sited, taking a look at the history of crashes, the speed of the area, and there's a lot of other variables that we used with ODOT to do that. They developed a tool that was very helpful to us. And so being able to have some certainty around where we're making that kind of investment early in the project has been very helpful. Next slide. So we're going to be bringing a number of things that also will help improve the rider's experience in the corridor. So the stations will all have shelters, lighting, and seating, as well as real-time arrival information that lets you know when that next bus is coming. Riders are also going to experience a more reliable trip and a faster trip. Improvements that will help speed up the bus include transit signal priority at the signals along the route. That keeps the bus moving. All-door boarding, so we're looking at articulated buses with 3 doors on the side. All would open at one time. It really makes the boarding process go really quickly, and it shortens the dwell time as well. Another thing we're doing is we're doing some bus stop balancing or optimization. So we're making sure that the spacing and the locations of those stations are in the right places where people want them, and then where we have other stops that are less frequently used and might be just taking up time that riders would like to move a little quicker. That's an option for us to speed things up a little bit. So I'm going to make a couple other points here. Sorry. There's a lot of places along TVA Highway where the bus is stopping really quite frequently. And this is because we don't have sidewalks or there aren't good ways for people to get to those stops. I think you've driven TVA Highway plenty to know that between Hillsborough and Cornelius, there's a segment in there that doesn't have any sidewalks. Mm-hmm. And so we have a lot of stops in that segment, for instance. And so the project is proposing to put some sidewalks in that area so we can actually not have quite as many stops. And when we do make an investment, people can safely come and go from that stop. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide here. So another big thing that we want to announce is that this is going to be a 12-minute service. Right now, it's a 15-minute service, and so our project is committing to improving the headways. So that means the buses are going to come that much more frequently. And I think that's going to be a nice addition for the alignment here. I want to talk to you a little bit about what the FX service is. So what we're calling this service, now we've got one that's running on Division, and that's the FX2. We don't know what this one will be called yet, but we know there will be an FX service. We've been developing standards so we can roll out more of these within the region. We've been seeing really good advantages of these types of projects for our riders. Not only is it speeding up their trips, of course, and making it easier for them to get where they need to go quickly, it is also just improving the experience of using transit, and that translates to more people using the service, and it increases the ridership in our system, which is also a great benefit to us. So we've been working to put all of these things into standards and develop kind of a notion of how we want to roll these things out to the region. So TV Highway is going to be in the position of being one of the next lines we roll out. 82nd Avenue is another one we're working on right now. So that's a pretty exciting thing. But we expect to use TV Highway, 82nd, and Division to help us understand how to go about doing that with more lines. All right, so a little bit of the station location process. So as I said, we have gone through a process to try and figure out what stops are the best and most important ones to keep. So obviously the highest ridership stops, gives us a pretty good indication that they're being well utilized. We want to make sure that we're accommodating all of the connections between TriMet lines, primarily that are going north and south, but also to light rail, as well as with ride connection. There's other services out here we want to make sure we're making connections with. There are a lot of stops where mobility devices are heavily used. We keep track of what we call lifts. That's when the ramp is deployed on a vehicle, and we know when that happens, and so it's good information. And so where we see a lot of those lifts, we know that those are important stops for us to retain. And then there's the obvious things like, there's a grocery store, or there's a school, or there's a library, and so going through those priorities has been a fun and interesting process. So we'll reveal the map here in the next slide. So this is where the stops are in this current process. Average spacing is about 1/3 of a mile. You'll see that there's a few stops in Cornelius that have some little black circles around them. We still have some work to do there, but I think we've gotten pretty good feedback from the outreach that we've done that the stops seem to be in the right place. And most of the folks that we've heard from feel like it's a pretty well-balanced a map at this point. So I think I'll hand it back to Jess.
Great, thanks, Dave. So I want to make clear that this map is part of what the steering committee will be voting on with their locally preferred alternative, and we're happy to flip back to this and take questions if needed later. But for now, can we go on to the next slide? So I mentioned earlier that part of the goal of this project is to move forward in the funding program called Small Starts, which is a federal grant program from the Federal Transit Administration. Right now, we have a cost estimate of right around $300 million for the entire corridor, and that's kind of the sweet spot because the cap of the Small Starts grant program is $150 million, which means that we're getting our 50% off coupon from the federal government for this project. But in order to be eligible for that, what we need to do as a region is bring forward the other half of the project funding. So the way that we're proposing to do that is what you see here on this pie chart. So we as regional project partners, that's Metro, TriMet, the four cities in the corridor and Washington County are planning to come together for $100 million. And we want to make a commitment to that amount for this project so that we can be really clear to the state that all project partners are in it together. And then we have an ask that TriMet is going to be putting in to the state legislature this session for $50 million in lottery bonds funding. We had a really productive breakfast 2 weeks ago out in the corridor with several of the state legislators in the corridor and also some representatives from the federal delegation where we talked to them about this funding strategy and got really good feedback. So this is what we're talking about in terms of how the project would get funded. Next slide. The timeline on which we need that funding is generally what's laid out here. It will take a little while for us to get from where we are right now until actual service begins in the corridor. Big transportation projects take quite a while. In the next couple of years, what we'll be doing is called project development, where we're getting from about 10% design all the way through to 100%, where we can hand those documents off to someone to start construction. Part of that is also doing the federal environmental process, and you can see the markers along the way when we're going to be needing to pull together funding. Next slide, please. So as we move forward, our steering committee actions, I mentioned that what they're going to be doing next is approving a locally preferred alternative, which consists of that map, which tells us where the general station locations are, the mode, which is bus rapid transit, and then the alignment, which is the Line 57. We're also asking the steering committee to approve that high-level funding agreement that they will, as a body, contribute $100 million together as local and regional project partners. And I'll just buzz quickly through the next slide or two. After the steering committee makes that decision to endorse the locally preferred alternative and we move into project development, I wanted to make clear that the public process doesn't end. TriMet will take over at that point, and they will have two bodies that work together to inform the design decisions that happen in that public in that process. On the next slide, you can see a little bit more about what those bodies are. There'll be a community advisory committee that pulls together community members and is a sounding board for some design questions and outreach activities. And then similar to our steering committee right now, you'll have a policy and budget committee that is also leadership from the corridor. And next slide is the last one, just to say, right now, we're here doing this presentation anticipating that steering committee approval of the LPA and funding strategy in a week or in a couple weeks. This spring, we'll be coming back to this city councils for a request to you to adopt that locally preferred alternative and also to approve an IGA, which commits funds to the project development phase of this project. And then in the summer, TriMet would apply for entry into project development with the Federal Transit Administration, and we would kick off the next phase of the project. So that's all we have to share tonight. Happy to take any questions that folks have.
Okay, thank you, Jess. Questions? Councilor Faulkner, did you have one?
I do. I wondered if you had information when you were, you had sort of a draft of what the possible stops might be, and I was just wondering if you had some information about how those stops were maybe a difference about, especially in particular for Forest Grove. I guess what I'm really getting at is how many stops are being eliminated in Forest Grove.
Good question. Not a number I have off the top of my head. We can go back to the map if you would like to see it. The ones that we are currently planning to retain are those at U. What's listed as A and B row is the Rose Grove Mobile Home Park. Then at Oak Street, 19th, which is the one at the Safeway. Then Elm, Ash, which is actually going to move slightly from where it is today, and then the terminus at B. And the resulting spacing there is pretty similar to the average along the corridor. And you can see that throughout when you take a look at how far the spacing is. And these have come, as Dave mentioned, from a lot of data analysis, conversations with staff. This is a map that was approved by the steering committee for public outreach, and then in public outreach, we received pretty high scores from folks asking them whether these stops would meet their needs as transit riders in the corridor.
Thank you.
Councilor Gustafson.
So, just to confirm, these are less stops and they're spaced further apart than currently? Yes. Okay. And how is this going to impact those that are mobility challenged, having to go further to get to their stops when it's already a bit of a struggle?
Should I take it? We have a committee that we work with through TriMet. It's our Committee for Accessible Transportation. And this is a topic that gets brought up pretty often. And one of the things that we try to emphasize is that these projects give us the opportunity to speed up everybody's trip. And it comes with some trade-offs, right? And so a lot of the investments that we are making these trips or making these locations work much, much better with the shelters and with a lot of accessible improvements to these locations, ways to get to them safely, and safe areas to wait. So while we would like to provide, as much density as necessary as stops for everybody to be as convenient as possible, we know that we have to ask everybody to make a compromise so that everybody can benefit with a faster trip. So they do participate in the work on these projects, and they help us understand what the goals are. And so we really do look at, where homes are, for example, where there's a lot of people that have mobility devices that need to have a stop nearby. We look at the data, like I mentioned. Where are we really seeing a lot of lift activity and where aren't we? So if we see a stop that has a lot of lift activity, we ask more questions. We're like, no, we probably need a stop in that location. So currently, a lot of the stops along this stretch have been here for many, many years prior to our current standards. And so they're, some of them are less than an eighth of a mile apart. And for our current bus standards, just a quarter mile is more what we're trying to do. And so it is a trade-off. It's definitely a trade-off, and it's something that we're trying to work through. But again, this can save a lot of time for a lot of people on the bus.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Jess probably will not be surprised by my question. So I really do value this project, the goals of safety and increased and improved public transportation. The east side of Forest Grove is a huge concern for the city, safety issues. And so in the last few years, we've really tried hard to get grants to, lobby our congressional delegation for funds. So I'm just wondering, I'm just a very blunt person. I'm just going to spit it out. In the finance, the local match, are these projects that we've been able to achieve through grant options and different things, are they going to be, can we use those for our matching fund is my first question. Or is there some sort of way that we can do that, I guess? And then my second follow-up question is, if we move forward with connecting sidewalks on Adair, Mountain View, some of those same areas you said, how do we do it in a way that we have a special secret sauce between Metro TriMet and the city where we're not redoing work, right? If we're improving sidewalk and safety and we already have those funds and we do it, I don't want to waste more taxpayer money by seeing you all come and destroy it right after we put it in. So I'm just wondering, we have been working in good effort and concert to improve that corridor for our community. And I want to see collaboration and cooperation and the best use of financial resources to achieve goals that we have that are the same.
Do you want to take the financial question? I'll take the...
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So good questions. And I appreciate that this is always something that you're really focused on because there's lots of opportunity for us to be very collaborative. And so from a funding perspective, we have defined a $300 million project. And as much as any of the things that are defined within that project are things that might be delivered or might be in the budget for the city to already be building, those types of contributions could count towards the local match. But if it's outside of that, that's also a conversation that we can have if it's an eligible expense to sort of add to the project as an overmatch. So we'll get into some of those details as we dig more deeply into design. To your second point, as a nexus to that question, there's a very detailed design process where your folks will be designing or will be reviewing the design. And there's lots of opportunities to very clearly understand what is included and make sure that other projects that are perhaps outside of the federal project are being designed in such a way that they can be delivered either on their own or as a betterment to the project, or whatever makes the most sense in terms of making sure that those dollars are being used appropriately, and that there's not sort of ripping things out, as you were mentioning. You want to add any detail on the design?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's quite a bit of coordination that we're going to be doing going forward, and this is just echoing what Kelly's saying, is that we're going to continue the conversation, and the people in your jurisdiction, we talk with Brian all the time and Dan, they're going to let us know when there's projects that are overlapping and that we need to coordinate on. ODOT's been a great partner too. I know that you guys have part of ODOT, but also part of it's not ODOT on this alignment. So yeah, we're ready to coordinate, and anything that we can do to kind of improve how we go about doing it and making sure that any investment that is made is something that's a long-term investment. We're happy to make that happen.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions?
I just want to make
Council
a comment.
President, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Everything looks really wonderful, but I do have concerns. I do have concerns about the stops that will be reduced. And 4 years ago, it was 4 or 5 years ago, with Brian and Dan, we did a tour, and I remember doing community engagement activities back then. I'm talking about 4 or 5 years ago. So I feel great that this is finally getting done because our community needs it. People on U Street, people on the Rose Grove that live there, this has been a nightmare for them. And as you said, many accidents have happened. So finally, after all these years, it's getting done. It's good to hear that.
Thank you. Okay. I don't see any other questions. So thank you all for coming. Thanks, Jess, for coming. I hope you feel better.
Great. Thank you very much for having us.
You're welcome. Drive safely. Thanks. Okay, our second presentation is actually 2 presentations in one. And so typically we have 15 minutes. We're going to have 30 minutes for this next presentation. So I'm going to call up Washington County Housing Services Update. We have Molly Rogers, Jill Chen, and Emily Roots. If you could come up to the center table, please. I think an SHS update as well, yeah. Right, all the stuff. Hello, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Wenzel and councilors. For the record, my name is Molly Rogers, and I am the Director of Housing Services for Washington County. I use she, her pronouns. Tonight, I am joined by Assistant Director Jill Chen, who's in charge of our Housing and Housing Authority side of our department, and also Emily Roots, who's our Communications Coordinator, focused tonight on the progress of our ending and preventing homelessness work. Right. Slide after that. Great. I just wanted to share with you that since we last joined you a year ago, it's been a year. I think I had just started my job just a few months prior. So we've done it all. No, I was kidding. We were on our way. But we really realized we needed to take another look at our strategic framework at that time. Our department and the needs of the community had grown tremendously over the last 6+ years, and we wanted to do some introspective time through that. We ended up changing our vision, mission, and equity statements. I'm really thrilled to be able to share those with you tonight. These words and framing were really shared and crafted and honed by a variety of different audiences, advisory bodies, as well as surveys we've done, focus groups, many dialogues. We had poster boards in our office and several heated moments in our executive team. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to share with you that we envision a Washington County where everyone has an affordable home with the supports and opportunities each of us needs to thrive. slide back. Oh, someone else is with. Oh, no, prior slide. We did bounce it. And through that, the Department of Housing Services creates pathways out of homelessness, promotes housing stability, and invests in affordable communities for Washington County and our residents. 2 more slides forward. And to achieve our vision, we advance racial equity and increase access for all who face barriers to housing. We address inequities in housing opportunity while prioritizing services to populations disproportionately impacted by these disparities. These are our values that we commit to leading with. First of all, collaboration. We can't do this work alone. We work in partnership with people we serve, other public agencies such as you all, nonprofit organizations, private businesses, and our neighbors. Accountability. We believe in transparency and being good stewards of the public resource. Responsiveness. We are committed to meeting the diverse needs of the community we serve and adapting in response to changing conditions. Equity. We center at racial equity and promote equitable access for all to an array of housing opportunities. Sustained impact. We take the long view and we make commitments to deliberate, strategic, and holistically sustainable approach. Slide. So we want to really honor that work and share with you that we have worked we're proud of the collaboration we have with Forest Grove and the work here. So this slide captures some of the highlights of the housing and shelter investments we have made in this community alongside. We have 306 total housing vouchers in this jurisdiction, which includes the Supportive Housing Services form of voucher called the Regional Long-Term Rent Assistance, or RLUF short. And it also includes some rapid rehousing vouchers funded by Supportive Housing Services, as well as federally funded Housing Choice Voucher program. The outreach provider serving this part of the county is the Forest Grove Foundation. Although we have population-specific service providers for youth, which is Home Plate, immigrants and refugees, ERCO, and we serve the county as a whole. Casa Amparo is operated by Centro Cultural, is a bridge shelter serving families and medically fragile adults here. And this site was purchased by Centro Cultural through the very successful state Project Turnkey program, and the operations are funded by SHS. Through all these efforts, in close coordination with the Forest Grove Police Department and our Sheriff's Office, we were able to close the Highway 47 encampment and offered everyone there a place for shelter, path to long-term housing. And finally, I wanted to uplift the Valfrey at Avenida 26, which is an affordable housing project funded through Washington County's allocation of the Metro Affordable Housing. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Emily and Jill. Well, Jill first, and then Emily to share more about the work.
Thank you, Molly. And for the record, I'm Jill Chen. I'm the Assistant Director for Housing Services at the Department of Housing Services in Washington County. I use she, her pronouns. I'm just going to touch a little bit on the housing services side, which is really focusing on a lot of the Metro Bond implementation, our preservation work, some of our home ownership, and a public using our public housing portfolio, as well as our rental assistance. Next slide, please. This is a large slide with a lot of dots. On there, you will see all those dots are where the Metro bonds have affordable housing projects in Washington County. The blue are the projects that Washington County itself has managed to provide, and the other colors are the ones from Beaverton and Hillsborough. In Forest Grove, As Molly mentioned, we have the Valkyrie, and we're very excited about a new permanent supportive housing project that is also in Forest Grove. It's actually now changed. Briefly spoke with Brian about the location of this, and we have heard the community's discussions. But in terms of the larger scale and sort of stepping back where we are on Metro affordable housing bonds, for the county, we have met every single goal that was set up from Metro in terms of the total production. We have 958 units with a goal against 814. We've exceeded our extremely low income units, as well as our units for families, as well as those for permanent supportive housing. So next slide, please. For me, it's very exciting what we've done. Plaza Los Amigos is one of those projects that is in neighboring Cornelius. This is one of the projects that was sponsored by REACH CDC and Bienestar CDC. It's 113 units. This is a groundbreaking that happened just in September 2024, and it was focused on families with the Latinx community. The Metro Housing Bonds provided over 13.6 million. We also provided 16 project-based Section 8 vouchers that Molly was mentioning earlier, as well as our housing production opportunity funds for $500,000. This is one of the largest and sort of, I want to say, shining examples of what Metro bonds could provide for our community. Next slide, please. In addition to our production of new housing for affordable housing, we are looking to preserve more of our existing stock that the Housing Authority own and operate. We are in the process of doing a renovation, a major renovation of 10 of our projects, consisting of almost 600 units, of which 60 are in Forest Grove. This is Parkside on Main Street and Villager on Fur Road. Their renovations finished end of 2023 and are completely re-leased up and operating and functioning well. And you can see in the pictures, the major rehab included ADA modifications, plumbing, roofing, ventilation systems, and more. The project is expected to extend the life of these buildings by an additional 30 plus years. Next slide, please. The final sort of housing side I wanted to mention is our disposition of some of our public housing units. These are our portfolio of mostly single-family homes and small plexes. This is owned by the Housing Authority, but under severe or tight housing urban development control, and we have received their approval for the sale. And we are hoping to use this as an opportunity for our low and moderate income residents to purchase with some discounts. And we're working with our local community-based organizations. In Forest Grove is West Tuwality Habitat of Humanity. The benefit of this is even as these units are being sold, our residents will not be displaced. They will all have tenant protection vouchers, and we have hired a consultant to help them move to find a better location for them that fits their housing needs. Next slide, please. Last but not least is our rental assistance. Molly referred to it earlier. This is where we're leveraging our federal resources. Our total rental assistance for this county is over $4,500. The Housing Choice Vouchers, or Section 8, is over $2,700. And we have made great strides in working with our Veterans Administration for supportive housing vouchers, the VASH, as well as with Mainstream Vouchers, which is supporting both residents with disabilities, non-elderly residents with disabilities. So this is a great opportunity where we're seeking to leverage our federal resources. And I'll turn it over to Emily.
Thank you, Jill. For the record, my name is Emily Roots, and I'm a Housing Communications Coordinator for the Department of Housing Services, and I use she, her pronouns. Next slide, please. So I'll be giving our homeless services update tonight, but I do want to be clear I'm focusing on the supportive housing services measure. That makes up the majority of our budget and was really what this presentation was honed to focus in on. We do also receive some federal resources through the Continuum of Care and some other funding, but for the purposes of this presentation, I'll be focusing on the supportive housing services funding behind our work. Next slide, please. So just to ground us, I want to share a brief story of hope. We talk a lot in this work about data and numbers and figures, and that's all tremendously important. And at the same time, the people that we're serving, it just can't be understated the value that SHS and affordable housing can have in someone's life. I had the opportunity to meet with Russell, who's pictured on the screen, a little over a year ago. At that time, he had recently transitioned from living in an encampment in Aloha to staying at a bridge shelter. And I was really excited to hear an update from him about 6 months ago that he had moved into permanent housing. And I just checked, he's still doing great. So that was really fantastic to hear. So think of Russell when you imagine all the different stories and numbers that we're going to walk through tonight. So a few highlights. First, I just want to share that we used 100% of the SHS budget. And I think it's really important to reiterate that because there's a misconception in the media that SHS is underspent and underutilized, and that couldn't be further from the truth. We exceeded our goal in terms of SHS spending, and we put those dollars to good use. That looked like 1,200 plus people moving into housing through SHS-funded programs. And that was a mix of either rapid rehousing or regional long-term rent assistance, basically different programs that offer rental assistance and case management so that folks can find stable housing. And we also helped over 4,000 people remain housed through eviction prevention and rent assistance programs. So that's folks who are on the cusp of experiencing homelessness who have been served an eviction and they're able to stay in their housing because they receive that kind of bridging rental assistance funding. When you kind of put all the pieces together, we served over 10,000 people through SHS-funded services alone. So that includes all the things I just talked about, but that also includes outreach, shelter, and our housing liaisons who are strategically embedded in different systems of care to catch people who need housing services. Next slide, please. So a lot of work that's been happening behind the scenes and within our team, and what that looks like is tremendous growth from 2021 to 2024. We see that in terms of a real significant increase in case managers and outreach workers. We see that in significant gains in shelter units. The anecdote I like to share is that in 2021, we had no year-round shelter capacity for adults experiencing homelessness and really few options for families experiencing homelessness. So that 49 bed count in 2021 was specifically for families experiencing homelessness in Washington County for our entire region. And with that, we also had few housing options to refer folks to. So our housing capacity has grown tremendously as well. And as our services have grown, naturally, our budget has also grown. You can look to the first couple of years of supportive housing services implementation. That was our building, our foundational period. Particularly in that first year, we didn't actually receive Metro SHS funds until that spring. So the county did an intra-fund loan to support those early operations. Now we're looking at approximately $120 million budget. And I do want to draw your attention to the lighter blue segment. That's the lion's share of our budget, which is going towards that long-term rent and services. And that's a values-based judgment. We see that as an incredibly successful program that has a long-term impact in ending someone's homelessness. And it's where we are continuing to strategically invest our funding. That said, I think we're one of many local government entities that are dealing with some challenging budget realities. You can go to the next slide. And that comes with our recently updated revenue forecasts and collections. So we started this fiscal year with a planned budget of looking at, we had lost my train of thought. So if you look at the previous fiscal year, which is where all these outcomes are from, we anticipated receiving 109 million. Collections fell below that at 103 million. So right there, you're looking at a $6 million shortfall. Then considering this current fiscal year that we're in right now, the initial forecast showed 115 million. We received an updated forecast from Metro in December of 2024, and it was basically the lowest end of the forecast we could have anticipated at 98 million. And with that, we're looking at $16 million in reductions in order to get our budget to balance. It's a challenging reality for those of you who've been doing homeless services work for a long time. You know that we have at times had to operate within that resource-constrained environment, and we really remain committed to continuing to put our services towards the greatest possible impact that we can have in addressing the needs of people experiencing homelessness. And I just want to land with a little bit of just an emphasis on what an impact that SHS has had in our community. Through supportive housing services, we've been able to house almost 3,000 people, 1,800 households. In a previous model without SHS, most of the new people that we served was really through attrition. So being able to serve so many new people is truly game-changing. And we've also reduced unsheltered homelessness by over 35% in Washington County. And I know there's many conversations happening at the political stage, frankly, a little bit above my pay grade. But I can say what is written on this slide, which is that potential SHS measure reductions would impact this progress. Next slide. Thank you so much. We'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Council, yeah or no? Councilor Schimmel?
I'm just wildly impressed with the volume of effort and work put into the program over the past few years, and it's great, Molly, to see how you've made it your own as a director, and I look forward to working with Jill more in the foreseeable future on some of the housing development. And your Forest Grove impact is really understated, as I've seen it with the not just the numbers you shared, but the housing placements in Forest Grove. I know there's a large number of families and individuals that have made Forest Grove their home thanks to a generous ARLA program. And I think the landlord incentives that you've instated, put the Washington County program over and above the others in terms of recruiting landlords. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate that you've taken liberty with the volume of investment into Population B, beyond the intention of the measure. So personally, I have an affinity for Population B. They're predominantly families and medically fragile. So thanks for taking that risk. I understand with the shortfall, there's some disinvestment in that in terms of rent assistance. So I know there's some tough decisions ahead, and I'm sure you're thrilled that Metro postponed their ballot measure. And I trust that opens the door for further negotiating on the terms. I sent you a note ahead of time on some thoughts. I think it was a shame that they didn't quite put together a litmus test for what they referred to as most in need. If you compare your prototypical chronic homeless person next to let's say a single mom that's 8 months pregnant, homeless 5 months. You put those two next to each other, and who's most in need? So I trust that a true litmus test would be considered, as well as reevaluating the split between A and B. My theory would be that Washington County would probably resemble a 60-40, like I think where you are now, versus a 75-25. So So I hope that might be a consideration by metros to give counties a discretion on their own split. Those are just a few thoughts, but I just appreciate the volume of work and that you've done with the CBOs.
Thank you. I just wanted to
Yeah.
comment on, we share the desire to, we are not here to have value propositions of households or serve everyone. We know that eviction prevention and rapid rehousing are far more cost-effective interventions, keeping people out of the system in their own home and all the other. That said, we also understand the percentage of chronically homeless individuals in our point are showing up percent of the total numbers, and our unsheltered is still around 30% of the total population. So the formula, I believe, was meant to be more of a funding allocation rather than a total household served. But we do hope we can track. I want to be able to have enough flexibility so we can be responsive to what the community needs are shifting, especially if the measure does get extended. That's a long time. Our community is going to change, and its needs are going to change. We have desires to better tap healthcare resources. A lot of the folks who are chronically homeless do need really long-term clinical and long-term support services. That is more costly, but that we believe the healthcare system should be paying a portion of that. So these things need to be able to sort of shift over time as we can leverage other resources and rethink some of that allocation.
Yeah, and I've mentioned those suggestions to my Metro rep. So, I'm willing to help with the advocacy to lend you more flexibility, more eligible expenses. What you need to, like you say, to capitalize on what the community needs.
I would love to figure out to change that formula so it actually shows what we have control over of those permanent housing placements that capacity, as opposed to us creating like some kind of division of how many people are coming into shelter that we have no control. So.
Any additional questions? Yeah, I would like to echo what Councilor Schimmel said. Just the amount of work that you have done and the achievements you've had. Like, we feel it in Forest Grove, and for our staff, like the partnerships we have with the county just are huge. There's not a lot that we could do without you. So thank you. Congratulations. I think that some of your statistics, like, I know it's more than statistics, but those statistics are really, really good. That's well done by all of you. So I just want to say thank you. Okay. Thanks. Have a nice night. It's a shocker, but we have no public hearings, ordinances, or resolutions tonight. So we're going to move on to councilor reports. I'm trying to remember which slide I started. We'll start in the middle. Councilor Schimmel, and then we'll go to Councilor Falconer.
Can I have a break?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a break. We'll start with Councilor Falconer.
Sure. Not a lot to report. I attended the JWC and the BRJOC, so the Joint Water Commission, and the obviously, so Pete Truax and Rod Feets are still involved, and yes, I think I missed his name on my. Thank you. Pete will be the chair of JWC, and then Tualatin Valley Water District as the chair for BRJOC. They gave us an update on repairs at the boat ramp, and that the water level is slightly delayed from previous years because of that work. It required in-water work, and so they needed to lower that. And then they also gave us an update about a grant for hazard mitigation.
Thank you. Not more of a break. Okay, Councilor Schimmel.
Well, following up on my previous update on the CCE, sounds like there's a few things maybe from our goals and objectives that CCE would uniquely be able to and support. One thing that they might be interested in that I know the library has a podcast equipment, but there may be some policy things that we need to sort out around that. I failed to mention that earlier in our work session, but we have had podcast technology that's unused right now. So let's I want to figure out how we can take advantage of that. Maybe give some CCEs some discretion. On the Economic Development Commission side, they are currently going through 9 building revitalization grant applications. So that program's being receptive, and group is looking through those, and then they'll send the recommendations to us. The Forest Grove Chamber had their State of the Chamber today. A couple key themes was the financial sustainability of the chamber they're focused on, as well as their new business support. Business development center, and my daughter actually has an appointment with them, so she's starting her own business, so she'll give me some little feedback on her experience. And then I'll lend credit to the Metro team who are here on the steering committee. But there's some financial obligations that are on the table right now, including $75,000 for the project design. That's in the next 2 years, and then $175,000 for construction between 27 and 28. But that's all predicated on the funding mechanisms coming through. So executive orders could drastically compromise that. So we'll probably hear more about that a little bit later, and we'd have to sort out a path for that funding. So there's still a lot of work ahead on that, but the principal value, as I've kind of seized on from that project, is it saves lives. It literally will save lives, and I've been trying to track the pedestrian accidents between here and through Cornelius. And in Cornelius in particular, there's been a fatality from a elder female in a wheelchair, and then a exchange student. And in both cases, they were westbound. So that doesn't conclude they were Forest Grove residents, but it tends to be westbound accidents in the evening. So I think the project's really important in terms of saving lives.
Great, thank you. Councilor Martinez.
Okay, so Forest Grove Senior Community Center had an open house Wednesday last week, and it was a success, smashing success, actually. It was well attended. It was wall-to-wall people. They all were provided with information at the same time to let them know when things would be rolling out, and the timeline, as well as they could, and why things were taking a little longer than what they needed to. And everybody seemed to be very happy with the results and the outcome. And then Sister City meeting we had Thursday night. So there's some questions, and I know I've spoke to several people about that, so we're working on getting those rectified. And then right after that meeting, I went to the translator screening, and Councilor Schimmel was there as well. And it was a really good presentation they did, talking about difficulties for kids in families where they have to do the translating for parents, and the barriers with that. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilor. Council President Valenzuela.
Thank you, Mayor. So I attended the Library Commission meeting last Wednesday. So the first thing we did, we welcomed our new members to the commission, and we held elections for the different officers. There's 3 ARPA projects that were funded. So the East End bathroom is complete. but they do need some new furnishing for the bathroom. And the other bathroom is almost done. The teen area partition almost done, and that will be communicated to you because we're going to celebrate that. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Donation, the library has very good friends, and they received a $50,000 donation that is to be allocated to the children's area. So there is this beautiful design. Someone is in charge of this, and it should be completed in about 6 to 9 months. The book sale was very successful. 5,600 books were sold. The next one will take place in May. It's for all of you to be attentive to that. The National Library Week is going to be from April 6th through the 12th. And again, it's something that I hope that we're all attentive to so we can be part of that. And that will be all.
Thank you. Counselor Marshall.
All right, so Parks and Rec, they voted on new chair. It actually is going to stay Brad Bafaro. Co-chair is going to be Joe Offer. As far as parks, Eastside Park is in a final design phase. Knox Ridge is basically waiting on signatures for that. The Parks Department has finished their leaf cleanup project. One thing that came up was the jail crew is now in limbo. The officer running it is retiring, and so they've been a big help doing it. So going forward, they're trying to figure out what they can do, if that's going to be something they can offer going forward. As we know, the tile for the pool is coming soon, so that'll be shut down very soon. Winter programs going on right now. They've started with summer planning for that as well. So they're doing a lot. They're going to be filling their time with during the pool closure with other stuff for the staff to do around the building. So they're going to keep themselves busy. But as far as that, I think that's most of it. And actually, lights were approved for NAMS for the field, and that'll be coming this summer, I believe, is what they were saying. We are waiting. Ann has set up a stakeholders meeting for the cost recovery plan, and she's trying to coordinate that for February. Get everybody together to kind of discuss and brainstorm on that again. So I'll keep everybody posted on that.
Yeah, good news. Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Gustafson.
A few things. I wasn't able to attend the open house, but I did have a meeting with Maria afterwards, and she did say that everyone asked a lot of questions, and it was a really good day. So I just missed it. And then to spring off of Counselor Schimmel and his comment about the podcast. The PAC also was interested in having a Facebook page so that they could promote their Festival of Arts. And I know that there's some, rules and guidelines around that, but the Festival of Arts, they needed to be able to somehow promote that.
Sorry.
It's okay. And that leads me into talking about Festival of the Arts. So at the last PAC meeting, we talked about the Festival of the Arts, and we were kicking off the planning for that for 2025. And talked a little bit about the Lincoln Park mural, which we'll start this late spring or summer. The Seven Guardians over by the library is still a bit of a trip hazard, so we're still trying to figure that out. And we're working on the plaques for the different artworks around town, so it can be known that it's the Public Arts Commission and the city that is one of the contributors to those things. And that's all I have for PAC. I was just appointed 2 positions. I was appointed to the National League of Cities 2025 Community and Economic Development Federal Advocacy Committee and the 2025 University Committees Council. So I'll be going to the NLC conference in March. And so I think we should all figure out who all is going. So if there's 5 or more of us, we can take advantage of the group rate.
Yeah, I don't think it would be 5 because we have it budgeted for 3 counselors and 1 mayor is what we have budgeted. So I don't think we'll be at the 5. Right? Yeah. All right. Any other comments? Okay, city manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to turn this on. My report might be a little longer than normal. So I've had a couple questions recently about how Forest Grove's projects may be impacted by the recent executive orders pertaining to the bipartisan infrastructure law, what's referred to as bill, and the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. So I reached out to our federal lobbyists, who are CFM, and they clarified that the executive orders were revised to clarify that only grants stemming from the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure and Charging Program, I know there's an acronym there, but I'm not sure what it is, are on pause, and other grants under such programs like RAISE, Safe Streets, Reconnecting Communities, at least for now, are proceeding as planned. That's as of today. They wanted to be very clear that this is kind of the latest information. It is subject to change. There are other efforts associated with reducing the federal budget that may impact these programs later. But for now, here's how it looks for the city of Forest Grove. So we still have 3 requests in for what's called Congressional Directed Spending Requests, or CDS requests. Those requests are for TV Highway, 21st Avenue, and the Forest Grove Loop Trail. Those are still moving forward. That process has not been changed, so we're still applying for that process. We'll still be working with our federal delegation to try and move those projects forward. Similarly, the monies that were awarded to the city through that program, one was for low-income solar for $900,000. The other one was for TV highway improvements, which was $850,000. Those were both congressional directed spending requests. Those are still intact. We are still working on both of those. For low-income solar, we're working with the Housing and Urban Development HUD to make sure that we're certified and can receive the funding. With TV highway, those monies actually go to the state, but they're earmarked for City of Forest Grove, and so those are still moving forward. One area where we are impacted is we were one of 17 area cities that did receive, was awarded a $15 million grant for EV charging stations. You might have heard our Light and Power Director talk about this a few weeks ago. That program is on pause and will likely be canceled. So the grant funds that we were slated to receive through that $15 million grant, and to be clear, that was $15 million for 17 cities. We would have gotten a portion of that, but that program is on pause. That's the National Electric Vehicle and Infrastructure Community Grant. So, Mayor, did you have a question? I saw that you raised.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that program is on pause. The city of Tualatin was administering that grant, and they have notified all of the cities kind of where that's at, and they'll keep us apprised. Light and Power also received a federal Department of Energy grid resiliency grant for $500,000 for wildfire mitigation. That grant has been awarded, but the money has not been distributed. That grant still appears to be intact. We have received no notification that we will not receive that grant. Neither was that part of the NVIEC program. So we are still planning on that grant moving forward. The city just last week received, and we'll be mentioning more about this soon on the website and social media, but we just received a grant last week for $1.435 million for Safe Routes to School. That was principally Greg Robertson from Public Works. Again, that funding does not appear to be in jeopardy. That grant has been awarded, but the money has not been distributed yet, so it's still waiting distribution, but we were fortunate to be selected amongst a very, very competitive project list. That's for the Mountain View intersection over by Neil Armstrong Middle School. One grant that we are in the process of applying for but have not applied is what's called a BRIC grant, or a Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities grant. The council will be hearing more about that soon. We're going to be talking about matching funds for that grant. It's a fairly large federal grant for our water reservoir project up off Watercrest. The Fern Hill and Maple Street intersection, that's not federally funded dependent, so it's still moving forward. Those MISTIP monies or county monies are still intact. Our TGM grant, or Transportation and Growth Management grant for TV highway access, that's also not dependent on federal funds, so that is moving forward. And I think that concludes all of the grants that we kind of have or are in process of doing right now. So as I find out more, I'll continue to update the council. But that's where we're at as of today. Thank you, Mayor.
Does council have any questions for Jesse on any of those things? I want to give an opportunity to follow up. Thank you for that. So I'll start with my mayor's report, but yesterday, Senator Merkley held a town hall in Tualatin, and Mayor Bubenek asked a question about the $15 million grant. Right now, it's on a 90-day pause. Senator Merkley, he said, like right now, all he can say is it's on a pause, but he doesn't expect, says that right now it appears that the administration is canceling all grants that have to do with electric vehicles and climate action. So, and that grant would have helped us put charging infrastructure in apartment complexes, public spaces. So that's and we don't really know for sure. 2 years ago, we were awarded the community solar for low income, and that would be on. So right now, that's still okay, but we're really unsure. I'll stick with the topic of Senator Merkley's town hall, and then I'll just work in reverse this time. Another situation or thing that he brought to our attention is that there's a Lincoln-Riley bill that was passed in the Senate, and it kind of the purpose of, or what that bill says, how he contextualized it to us or explained it to us, is that now if anyone of any age, children to adults, is suspected of committing a crime. So I'm going to use the same example he used. A 5-year-old goes to a grocery store and is by like the candy, puts his hands in his pocket or her hands in her pocket, and then it doesn't, and they think that that 5-year-old stole candy, and they take them to the police. They pull out they turn out their pockets. There's no theft. That individual could be held in immigration or by immigration because it was suspected, not because they found anything, not because they were charged, just the suspect. So that went through the Senate without going through committees. So things are rolling out really fast. And some things are going through the court system. He mentioned like trying to slow down the process, but I think that it's important that we understand some of the things that are happening in our community and could potentially happen to our community members. So I wanted to update you on that. And then Councilor Schimmel mentioned this in his questions to Washington County, but it appears that Metro is going to delay the ballot measure to make some changes to SHS. And so, I went to the MMC meeting, which is the Metropolitan Mayors Consortium. And, our message really is like, we want collaboration. We want, there's some things we're hearing about data being shared, and we want to be at the table. We want all the people to be at the table and to come up with something really good. So it wasn't to, some of us mayors wrote letters, and it wasn't to delay just for the sake of delaying. It was to delay to really make sure there was transparency, community engagement, and collaboration and cooperation. Sorry, so that EV grant is toast. The transportation package, they're looking tolling is still not going to be, is on pause for 3 years. And the governor's not going to, but, think the gas tax, like looking at that or stiff. Anyways, registration fees are just a lot of things that are going to come out of that transportation package. I attended the retirement parties for two long-serving electeds in Washington County. Roy Rogers served for over 40 years. I want to say 42 years. He's the longest-serving elected in Washington County. He retired from Washington County Commissioners, and Jason Snyder was elected to replace him. And then Mayor Steve Calloway from Hillsborough termed out at 8 years. And so he retired. And that's why, thank you for the people who went to the translator showing. That's why I was not there. And then the last thing I have two things. But I also just want to say that I want to just say thank you to the council. I thought that the retreat, there was like lots of really good conversation happening. And I just appreciate people showing up and, coming with ideas and talking and having, what they said. And what I like to say too is like really good policy work is about having difficult conversations, multiple perspectives, and unpacking them in a way to create a policy that fits the needs of the most people. Like that's, basically what I see our job being. I could be wrong, but that's how I see it. Okay, and so with that, the council will adjourn to hold a closed executive session under ORS 1926602D to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. No formal decisions or actions will be taken. Representatives of the news media may not attend executive sessions on labor negotiations. And then do I read my next? Because we have two executive sessions. Should I read the other one too?
You certainly can. That's
I think
fine.
I have to informal.
Yeah, because we're going to be in executive session.
So we have two executive sessions. So following that executive session, the council will, the URA board will convene to hold an executive session, ORS 1926602E, to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. And with that, I adjourn this meeting. So we'll go in the conference room.